My name is Alyssa. I How do I even get into my whole career? I went on a Netflix show called The Circle, and I was an assistant to a sex coach at that time. And now I'm building a social media presence around sex education while getting my certification at the Sexual Health Alliance. On my bucket list, I would like to have a sex ed platform that is inclusive and accessible to as many people as humanly possible. That's like sort of my biggest top bucket list thing, because I just want to be able to provide as much information to as many people as I possibly can. But on the personal side, I really would like to do some more traveling in the next couple of years, and going to Japan has been a big bucket list one for me for a really long time. And so I hope I get to do that. And oh gosh, a third bucket list. Okay, my last bucket list item would be to live alone for once. I've never lived by myself, and that feels like a big journey for me. I think I would enjoy it. Those are, I guess that's definitely more of a personal thing, but I think that's on my bucket list as I'm entering my 30s soon. I've always been a person who enjoyed the process of getting ready. I think there are tons of people who enjoy like sort of taking a shower, being fresh faced, and going about their day. I love getting ready, and it's sort of like meditative in a way. So I always like will find some time, even if it's 15 minutes, just to like make myself feel good, even if it's like a little bit of just whatever extra skincare or whatever it is. So getting ready is really important to me. But I also have gotten very into like running and walking, and I've never been a person who like worked out. I was like the clumsiest, least athletic person ever. And it's just been like such a lovely way to clear my mind, especially in the beginning of the day. I would much prefer to do that in the beginning of the day. And I have two dogs. And so I'll just take my doggies with me and we'll go walk around. And I'm going to spend my whole weekend going on some nice hikes. So just walks galore. I love it. I love a good walk. I don't know if there's any like one specific type of bad advice, but I think it's more of like the approach that people take. We are all trying to like be responsible and give correct information all the time, but it's physically impossible that everyone knows everything about every single topic, you know? And so I love when people come to me and they say, you know what, like here's some extra information that you didn't include, but I think you would really appreciate. Or actually, I don't think that the way that you phrase that is really like honest or giving like the correct um interpretation of what you're trying to communicate, whatever it is. So it's less of like the advice itself and more the way that it's delivered, because I think like ultimately being professionals in a field like this, a lot of the research is new and it's changing, and we're all trying to learn everything that we possibly can. And that's not always possible. And so I love when people have more for me to learn, but I think it's sort of like when people are accusatory, that's weird to me. I'm like, we're all trying to do the same thing, you know? So I don't think there's any like one piece of bad advice that I can think of right now. I'm curious to hear what other people said though. I like to spend a lot of time alone. So I like to like watch things alone, sit in my bed and read alone. I like to just like the way that I recharge is really by like spending me time. And sometimes it's like even just cleaning my room and like listening to something in the background, like doing things in solitude and sort of like an isolated thing, like really recharges me a lot more than like going out and being social. And that's something that I've learned as I've moved to like my late 20s, that socializing is great, but it like sort of empties my tank, and doing things alone and having my time to myself is like the best thing that I can do for myself. So anything that's sort of solitary. I'm a big Sims player, and there is nothing like the escapism that a game like The Sims can provide you. So anything alone and solitary, those are my favorite kinds of self-care. I think For me, radical collaboration is having conversations with people um, that have a whole bunch of different opinions about, not even different opinions, but different like specializations. Like, I think you can, being part of a community like SHA, you have the opportunity to like really get in touch with people who have like such a depth of knowledge in things. Like, I appreciate the level to which people dive into the topics that they really love. And so I think for me, the radical collaboration comes into like the radicalization of it is like how much people know about things that would like typically be taboo in any other space, and bringing that into a collaborative, environment the way that SHA does. The podcast, I wouldn't say that like it's my favorite podcast, but it's definitely the one that influenced me the most to like sort of push myself in this direction. Oddly, the early days of Call Her Daddy. And that's a podcast that like now that time has passed and I'm not like in, my early 20s anymore. It's funny to see how like a lot of, especially the early days, were like really damaging and not good advice. Like that's probably the bad advice that I've heard in the field. But the biggest thing for me was seeing somebody who was my age and was so shamelessly talking about sexuality. Like I'd never seen that before, never heard that before. I couldn't believe that like this girl was, I think she was like 21 when she started, and she was just graduating out of college and was just talking about everything under the sun. Like it was nothing to her, and doing it publicly. And that was like life changing and game changing in its own right. And while obviously a lot of the advice that she gave and or they gave wasn't great, the tone of the show like put me on a completely different trajectory. So that would be the podcast. And then for the book, Come As You Are, is like I've read that a million times. I love it so much. It's so like brilliantly written to be so consumable while also giving you like actual scientific information about human sexuality. And it was sort of like my introduction into reading about all of this stuff. And again, I've read it like a handful of times now, and I don't do that very often. So in the sex ed space, that would be my favorite book. I think social media has given people a platform to talk about their sexuality in like a much more uninhibited way, which is so important. Obviously, there are things that we have to work around to allow for in the space, but it's been fun to make content that is fun for people to consume. Like I love that on SHA's Instagram, you can like play quizzes and see which question you're getting right or wrong. And it makes it playful and fun and digestible and not scary. And I think that there's something so like, even just like psychologically special about, I mean, special, also scary, but mostly special in this context, about having things be like in your phone and so intimate and like personal, and then be able to bring in like sex education and having even like beyond education in sort of like a clinical sense, like the fun parts of it, like being able to learn all of that and have it be in the palm of your hand is like so special, and it feels less scary and less intimidating. It's just a great way to get information out there, and you can learn and connect with your audience so much more, which has been like one of the best parts of the whole experience for me, is like learning what people want to hear, what people want to learn, and then like just delivering it to them and knowing that you're providing the impact by creating, by way of creating this community and this conversation in the palm of people's hand. It's like amazing. I am working on creating a lot of content on my Instagram and on my YouTube account and on TikTok. And I'm at Alyssa Ljub, LJUB, on everything. And I always am opening up question boxes for specific types of content that people want to see, whether that's like from a professional who doesn't feel like they want to make the content themselves, but they're like, I think this would be a great idea, I'll do it. And follow SHA on everything too, especially on Instagram and YouTube, because they're also always posting really fun things, especially on the blog. The blog is like an untapped resource. We love the blog.